Johnny Depp's Honest Confession, the actor's most revealing interview yet. I'm not trying to prove anything anymore. I'm just telling the truth. Johnny Depp, for more than 4 decades, Johnny Depp has been a riddle wrapped in a leather jacket, a man both adored and misunderstood, both dreamer and survivor. But in his latest and perhaps most brutally candid interview yet, the 62-year-old Hollywood icon opens the floodgates. Gone are the rehearsed smiles, the pirate swagger, the mysterious silence. What remains is raw, unfiltered truth, an honest confession that lays bare the soul of a man who has been burned by fame, betrayed by friends, and yet refuses to surrender his humanity. The interview that stopped the noise in. A wide-ranging conversation with the Sunday Times, parts of which were later echoed in Vanity Fair and Entertainment Weekly. Depp finally spoke openly about the chapters of his life the world only thought it knew. He wasn't promoting a film. He wasn't there to charm. He was there to set the record straight, to reflect, and to confess. Sitting in a quiet hotel suite in Paris, his trademark scarves draped loosely around his neck, Depp looks smaller in person. Not physically, but spiritually. There's no armor anymore, he admits. After everything that happened, I stopped hiding behind characters. I had to meet myself, and so he does. For nearly 2 hours, Depp opens up about his childhood traumas, the chaos of fame, the pain of betrayal, the cost of truth, and the fragile peace he's still trying to hold on to. A childhood written in bruises. The first confession is perhaps the most haunting. Depp revisits the dark corridors of his early life in Kentucky, memories that shaped both the man and the myth. She was cruel, he says quietly, referring to his late mother, Betty Sue Palmer. She'd hit me with whatever was close. A phone, an ashtray, her hand, anything. It didn't matter, man. It's not bitterness in his voice. It's fatigue. The kind that lingers when the wound has healed but the scar still itches. She taught me how not to raise kids, he says. Just do the opposite of everything she did. Those who know Depp best often say this confession explains everything. His empathy, his sadness, his instinct to protect others, even those who hurt him. He grew up watching his father, John Sr., silently endure the storm. And when his father finally walked out, young Johnny followed him out the door. I remember packing my stuff in garbage bags, he recalls. That was the day I learned what leaving means. Decades later, that memory still bleeds into his art. The wandering souls he plays on screen, from Edward Scissorhands to Captain Jack Sparrow, all carry that same ache for belonging. The trial that shattered Hollywood, when the conversation inevitably turns to the Amber Heard defamation trial, Depp straightens in his seat. For a moment he looks almost weary, as if revisiting a war he never wanted but couldn't avoid. I didn't choose that fight, he says. But if someone tries to destroy your life with lies, you don't just sit there. You stand up. For yourself, for your kids, for truth. Depp pauses before adding with deliberate calm, I have no regrets, none. I would fight it again and until the bitter fucking end. For Depp, the trial wasn't just about a lawsuit. It was about reclaiming his name and his soul. I became the crash test dummy for the Me Too movement, he explains, borrowing the same phrase he used in the Sunday Times. People weren't even looking at facts anymore. They were picking sides, and I was already guilty before I could speak. He's careful not to mention Amber Heard by name too often. He doesn't need to. His point isn't vengeance, it's vindication. The truth doesn't rot, he says. It just takes time to surface. The Hollywood betrayal, if the courtroom bruised him. Hollywood's silence broke him. There were people who came to my kids' birthday parties. People I helped when they needed work or money, Depp says, shaking his head. And the moment the storm came, they vanished, gone. Ghosts. He laughs bitterly, not with humor, but disbelief. Some of them even sent texts, hang in there, brother, while they were signing petitions to get me dropped from films. I saw everything. You can't fake loyalty. This was perhaps his greatest confession, not of guilt, but of heartbreak. The man who once embodied Hollywood's rebellious charm now speaks of it like a lover who betrayed him. They like you when you're selling tickets, he says. When you stop being profitable, they pretend you don't exist. That's not an industry. That's a machine. When asked if he'd ever return to Hollywood fully, Depp's answer is as poetic as it is painful. I never left. Hollywood left me. Fame. The sweet poison Depp confesses that he never wanted fame, not the circus that came with it. Fame is like an illness, he says. At first it feels like a gift. Then it grows teeth. He remembers the early days, the overnight fame from 21 Jump Street, the screaming fans, the endless paparazzi flashes. I was just a kid, he says. You think it's love, but it's not. It's consumption. They don't want you. They want the idea of you. He compares fame to being inside a fishbowl with the world tapping on the glass. For a man known for mystery, the invasion has been suffocating. There's no privacy left. If I step outside, someone's filming. If I sneeze, it's a headline. That's why he now spends most of his time in Europe, in his countryside home in France, painting, writing, and playing music. It's peaceful here, he says. No one cares who I was. They care who I am. The confession about love. Depp's eyes soften when the subject of love comes up. It's a complicated topic for him, one filled with both poetry and pain. I've always believed love can fix broken people, he confesses. Maybe that's my biggest mistake. He doesn't name names. But it's clear his reflections span decades of relationships, from Winona Ryder to Vanessa Paradis to Amber Heard. I saw sadness in people and thought I could help, he says. But you can't save someone who doesn't want saving. Then, after a long pause, he adds, and sometimes they don't want love. They want to be rescued. That's not the same thing. This, more than anything, feels like Depp's self-awareness at its sharpest. A man who has loved deeply, perhaps too deeply, and finally understands that empathy can be a trap. Love is not a contract, he says quietly. It's a mirror, and sometimes you don't like what it shows. The lonely years after the trial and his Hollywood fallout, Depp disappeared from public view for nearly a year. Rumors swirled about his health, his finances, his drinking. But in his confession, he explains the silence was intentional. I needed to hear my own voice again, he says. The world was too loud. Everyone had an opinion. Lawyers, journalists, strangers online. I just wanted silence. He spent that year painting and recording music with friends like Jeff Beck, before Beck's passing. Music saved me, he admits. When I play, I don't feel judged. I just am. He also found solace in solitude, something he once feared. It's strange, he muses. You spend your life chasing people, attention, love, and then one day you realize peace is just being alone and okay with it. Still, there's sadness there. The melancholy of a man who has given the world so much of himself that he sometimes feels there's nothing left to give. The confession. About regret, when asked if he has regrets. Depp lets out a soft laugh. Of course I do. Everyone does. But regret's a waste of time if you don't learn from it. He confesses that his greatest regret isn't the movies he turned down or the fame he lost. It's the years he spent trying to prove himself to people who didn't matter. I spent too much time explaining myself to people who'd already decided what to believe, he says. I should have just kept playing music and stayed out of the circus. But there's one thing he says he'll never regret. Defending the truth. Because truth doesn't age. He calls the trial a brutal but necessary awakening. The world saw everything, he says. My pain, my mistakes, my anger. But at least it was real. I wasn't hiding anymore. The artist behind the myth away from Hollywood's glare, Depp has returned to what he calls his first loves, painting, poetry, and music. His art studio, tucked away in the French countryside, is filled with portraits of legends, Bob Dylan, Elizabeth Taylor, Heath Ledger, and his late friend Jeff Beck. When I paint, I talk to them, he confesses. Not like ghosts, more like echoes. Depp also continues his music, often performing quietly in Europe with his band, the Hollywood Vampires. Music doesn't judge, he smiles. It doesn't care about gossip. It only listens. For a man once trapped by the spotlight, art has become both refuge and redemption. It's like breathing again, he says. Just color, sound, truth. Reflections on truth and legacy. In his final reflections, Depp sounds like a man who's finally made peace with imperfection. I'm not trying to be liked anymore, he says. I'm trying to be understood. He's philosophical about fame and fate. Hollywood builds you up with confetti, then watches you choke on it, he quips with that signature crooked grin. But if you survive it, if you really survive it, you come out cleaner. He insists he's not bitter, just wiser. They can cancel movies, they can cancel contracts, but they can't cancel truth. And they can't cancel what you've given people through art. When asked how he wants to be remembered, Depp doesn't hesitate. As someone who didn't fake it. I lived the mess. I owned the mistakes. I loved with my whole damn heart.